Okay, so greetings everyone. This is Javi Brummer speaking from the Claims Conference office in New York City. Today's teleconference is part of the monthly teleconference series open to social service agencies around the world and is coordinated by myself and Elisa Stern, the Director of Supportive Services at Project for Holocaust Survivors at Bikur Cholim Chesed Organization in Brooklyn, New York, and Anat Granith, a clinician at Aviv Older Adult Services at Jewish Family and Career Services of Atlanta, Georgia. You can hear the audio recordings of all the previous teleconferences if you go to the Claims Conference Kavod Multimedia page at kavod.claimscon.org/multimedia. Today's teleconference is entitled Sibling Relationships in Survivor Families, presented by Dr. Irit Felsen, Adjunct Professor at Yeshiva University. Please note that there is no PowerPoint today. Before we begin, please note that this teleconference is being recorded in its entirety, and the audio link will be put on the Claims Conference Caring for Holocaust Survivors Facebook page within a day or two, and may also be put on the Claims Conference website. I also wanted everyone to know that we now have 155 members on the Facebook page, and that's very exciting. Please put your phone on mute, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. And now I will hand over the floor to Elisa and Anat.
Thank you. This is Elisa Stern. As our survivors age, even those who are fiercely independent are now beginning to rely more on their adult children. And age-adult dynamics between grown siblings often become more pronounced as family members struggle with changing roles. This year, with support from Jewish Federations of North America's Center for Advancing Holocaust Survivor Care, my organization asked Dr. Irit Felsen to lead a series of monthly discussions for members of the second generation called Survivor Families, Our Parents, Ourselves, Our Changing Lives. One of the subjects that we have explored together has been the complexities of sibling relationships in survivor families and understanding one another as a way to support each other and to support it. Participants have repeatedly told us that our inclusion of this important topic has been hopeful and healing and continues to help them moving forward in their care of their parents and themselves. So Anat and I felt it important to bring this conversation into our teleconference series, and we're so lucky to be joined by none other by Dr. Irit Felsen today. Dr. Felsen, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Again, Dr. Felsen, it's an honor to have you back with us again. Dr. Irit Felsen is a clinical psychologist and adjunct professor of psychology at Yeshiva University. In both her research and clinical work, Dr. Felsen has a strong interest in trauma, loss, and displacement, particularly as it affects survivors of the Shoah and their descendants. She is a member of the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress, a researcher with the Yale University Trauma Study Group, and a member of the UN NGO on Mental Health, in which she has recently presented a talk about trauma and the family. Earlier in time, Dr. Felsen ran a second-generation group for many years, as she served as coordinator of Holocaust services at Jewish Family Services of Metro West, New Jersey. Currently a consultant to several national and community organizations that provide services to Holocaust survivors and their loved ones. Dr. Felsen is a recognized expert in the area of Holocaust survivor families. Over the past year, as Elisa mentioned, with support from the Jewish Federations of North America Center for Advancing Holocaust Survivor Care, Dr. Felsen travels monthly to Brooklyn to lead a series of discussions for members of the second generation. After each gathering, Dr. Felsen summarizes the discussion in an article on her blog so that the material is available widely due to the request from second-generation members who live outside the New York, New Jersey area. We are so proud to have Dr. Felsen join us today to speak about the vitally important topic, sibling relationships in survivor families. Thank you, Dr. Felsen.
Thank you very much for the lovely introduction. And do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because there was all of a sudden a very bad echo. And thank you for the invitation to be with you again. It's a great pleasure for me to do this. And what we want to speak today about is indeed the relationship between adult siblings in Holocaust families. So most of us, second generation, have grown up with at least one sibling, and in fact, most people in the United States, in Canada, and in Israel grow up with siblings. And for those of us who do, the relationships with our siblings are often a profoundly important aspect of family life. The relationship with siblings are, in fact, the longest relationship we have across our lifespan. Our spouses and our children did not know us when we were young. Our parents, unfortunately, will not be there when we're old. The sibling relationship is the one relationship that accompanies us for the longest chunk of this journey through life. And studies have shown that during the early years, during childhood and adolescence, siblings are really not just some pale secondary characters on the stage of the drama of family life. They're really often very important attachment figures for each other. And in old age, siblings very often are very important sources of socialization and support for each other. Despite this very potential important role that the sibling relationship has, this is a relationship that's been quite neglected, relatively speaking, in the psychological literature, both in psychoanalytic and in empirical literature, in comparison with the emphasis on the relationship between each individual child and the parent or the parents. What I would like to talk about today is some of the things that I think are related to the influences of parental trauma on some very unique aspects of the sibling relationship in Holocaust survivor families. And I would like to share some of these thoughts, which I've based on observations that I have accumulated over more than 25 years of encounters with survivors, with the second generation, both in clinical settings as well as in less formal settings and in meetings. You know, in fact, it happens to be that almost every week when I meet somebody new, last week I met a colleague in a different state, a second generation professional, and I mentioned that I'm doing this conference, and she said, "Oh, really?" And as I said some of these main ideas that I'm going to present to you, I could see on her face the reaction that I always see when I speak about it, which is why I thought it would be a good idea to start speaking about it, and I've started doing that several years ago. So I'll start by telling you that I'll just state at this point, and we'll expand on it, that the observations that I've made often show me Hello? All is well?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Often reveal a pattern of very polarized roles in the family, very accentuated differences in the adaptational styles, I will call it, among siblings, and I will explain that in a few minutes more. And the differences between the siblings within the same family are often accompanied by very intense negative feelings about each other. So I will start by quoting a couple of people just to give you a flavor. So let's say Sarah, the daughter of two Holocaust survivors, has had to cope with serious health crises, both with her husband and her daughter, very difficult time in her life, and she expressed very desperate loneliness and a great need for family support. But she said to me, "I have no relatives other than my husband and my daughter. My brother is self-destructive. I don't have a brother that I can talk to in any reasonable way. I am more alone than they," and she meant her Holocaust survivor parents, "I am more alone than they were. We have no second cousin or so like they did. We have nobody." And another person last week, someone I just started seeing, said, "My brother, I have no relationship with my brother, no relationship with him at all, and he lives in the same town. I frequently drive by his house. My pain around my family is something I've struggled with my whole life. And the reason that I even get these quotes is because I have noticed these things 20 years ago or so, and by now I always ask about it, because in the beginning, people would come and would talk about their issues, and their relationship with their siblings would not even really come into the conversation. But now, since I ask about it, I often get it right away. So what I have frequently observed, as I said, is a particular pattern among adult siblings, which suggests a very markedly differentiated roles between them within the family. And it looks like that. One sibling has often remained geographically close to the parents and leads a life which is much more emotionally and otherwise intertwined with them. This sibling sees the parents much more frequently, does things with the parents much more frequently. This sibling shares a lot of their personal difficulties and challenges with the parents, and they seem to be often repeatedly in need of being rescued by the parents from various personal crises. This sibling is also often financially supported by the parents, either directly by parents simply, giving them money on a regular basis to help them, or sometimes this sibling was taken into the family business. However, when this child is involved in the family business, they were often not actually viewed as truly contributing to the business. It's looked at more as if the employment in the family business is the solution to the difficulties that this individual had in finding, or more often in keeping, jobs elsewhere. The functioning of this individual in the family business is viewed more as an excuse to provide them with some structure and a salary, rather than them being a really viable part of the business. When this sibling, who is more intertwined with the parents, I would call it, is a son, the relationship with the survivor parents, and especially with the survivor father, who runs the business, and even when they're not in the family business, when the son is the one who's more intertwined, the relationship with the parents, and especially with the survivor father, as I said, are much more labile and difficult. When the sibling who is in this role is a female, there are often less tensions in her relationship with the parents, but there are often tensions in her marriage around the intensity of her commitment and involvement with her parents, and a great sense of being torn and pressures in every direction to be with the parents, to be with the husband, to be with the parents, to be with the children. A lot of tensions around those functions. In contrast, in the same family, there are usually either another or other siblings who seem to have been able to move further away geographically, have been typically more professionally and financially successful, and have been also less emotionally involved with the parents, in the sense that they don't tell them so much, they don't talk to them so much about their own stuff, and their lesser degree of emotional involvement and transparency is such that the parents or the other siblings sometimes feel that they were kind of emotionally made irrelevant or abandoned by this more emancipated sibling. The relationship, the quality of the relationship, so these are differences in the lifestyle, in the adaptational style, as I call it, and in the relationship with the parents. Now I would like to talk a little bit more about the quality of the relationship between the siblings. So the relationship between the adult siblings often reveal deep mutual criticisms that are associated with these different roles in the family. Each sibling is actually very acutely aware of what they perceive as the ways in which the other sibling hurt the parents, the survivor parents. the impact of the other sibling on the survivor parent's health and feelings of well-being is often described in very extreme terms or expressions, such as he's killing them or she's driving them to the grave. And these intense feelings reflect several things. First of all, they are related and reflect concerns that have been shown in studies to be very prominent in the psychological life and in the relational ways of children of survivors. And these concerns are concerns for the well-being of the parents, concerns about protecting the parents from pain, concerns about not triggering the parents and not making them sad. So first of all, the intensity of response of one sibling to the behavior of the other when they think that they're hurting the parent is very much fueled by how central each of the siblings feels the concerns about protecting the parents are, although they each interpret how to do that, how to protect the parents in a different way. And it also reflects the very palpable presence of issues of life and death that are really part of the family atmosphere in survivor families simply because of the facts of such massive losses. And there's a beautiful older paper by Ilse Grubrich-Simitis from 1984 called From Concretism to Metaphor, which speaks about how concrete these issues are for us. So when I actually feel that my sister is killing my parents and I feel it and experience it concretely, I'm not saying it as a metaphorical expression, I actually feel it concretely, then of course it can fuel very deep resentments between siblings. So how do such intense mutual resentments come to be? So, by the way, I hear a lot of noise on the line. I hear people speaking and a lot of noise, just to say. So when parents suffer from significant post-traumatic reactions, their responses to events and interactions that will occur during the normative course of raising children might often be less than optimally regulated. We know that parents who suffer from post-traumatic reactions can be more anxious, more easily irritable, more easily upset about a lot of things, and raising children will give plenty of opportunity for a lot of those interactions to take place. However, dysregulated emotional reactions in the parents, such as seeing that the parents has become very anxious because the sibling did something or didn't come home on time or did something else, and the parent is intensely anxious and suffering or very fearful or depressed in response to some action that was taken by one sibling, these observed responses in the parent can have a dramatic impact on other siblings in the family. So having caused parental distress or pain is taken as an act of extreme cruelty in the context of relationships with parents who suffered already so much, and with the predominance of concerns in children of survivors about protecting their parents. So, for example, my patient, let's call her Monica, was always the good girl, did only what her parents wanted her to do, and really did not do what she knew they would not have wanted her to do. She Javi?
I apologize. We're having, I know. Can I just ask, there's some kind of technical problem. I'm trying to work on it, but in the meantime, can I just ask everyone to mute their phone because there is some kind of technical problem. There's at least one person who has not muted their phone, so please do that. It's very disruptive, and I am working on the technical problem in the back, but I can't it's taking me a few minutes. So in the meantime, if everyone once again can mute their phone, I would really appreciate it. It's very distracting. Okay, I hope the person who needs to mute their phone is hearing this. So, okay,
right.
It sounds quiet
I have
now.
to say, it sounds almost like someone is cooking for Passover while listening, which I totally understand, but I just find it very hard to.
Now. Yes,
okay,
I understand,
great.
And I apologize. It sounds quiet now. Thank you, and I am working on the technical problem.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Javi. So as I was saying, my patient Monica was always the good girl. She did what her parents wanted her to do. She didn't do what she knew they wouldn't want her to do. She responded and internalized the anxiety of her parents. She stayed nearby. She didn't go to the college further away where she wanted to go. She constricted a lot of her choices about her personal development to only that which would not cause the parents too much anxiety and concern. Her brother, on the other hand, had always been the troubled child all along, unleashing a lot of anxiety in the parents, a lot of rage, and often also being on the receiving end of some physical violence, especially from his father. When the brother when he graduated from high school, he decided to enlist in the American military, and he viewed it really as his only chance to get away, and he probably wasn't wrong because the parents really were very against their children going away, both of them. The father cried for several days on end, my patient Monica said, after he heard that, and she was unable to comprehend how her brother was able to cause their parents such intense pain. As a result of all of these very painful and very dramatic interactions that she observed between her brother and her parents throughout the years, Monica really hated her brother and wanted nothing to do with him for many years as an adult. It was only after several years in therapy that she could begin to actually view his behavior more compassionately, and as she became more aware of the cost of some of her choices, she also became aware of some of the reasons perhaps for his choices. So when survivor parents continued to suffer from post-traumatic reactions, and that is an important sentence because we have to remember that there is great variability within the population of survivors, and there is great impact to the different levels of their continued post-traumatic symptomatology. But when they suffered from post-traumatic reactions and could not contain them very well, then children in these families had very difficult choices to make in terms of their own developmental needs. The choice was not necessarily a fully conscious one. It's a choice taken both consciously and partially non-consciously. The choice is to constrict oneself like Monica did in order to appease the anxieties of survivor parents, and that is a path that was more typically taken by daughters, while other children, more typically sons, had to sort of harden themselves and resist identifying with parental anxieties and worries and please, so to speak, please to stay very constricted in order to be able to maintain their own sense of self and pursue their own direction and goals. The determination of which child in the family took the more dependent role and which took the more rebellious role or the more emancipated role is a question to which many factors contributed. Gender, birth order, the age difference between children, changes in the life of the family and in the situation of the family, financial security, and so forth, changes in the state of the parents' post-traumatic symptoms, because a lot of people got better with time as time went on and separated them from their traumatic experiences. All of these things can play a very important role in terms of the impact on different children in the family. And many other factors related to the individual child are also very important in this context. So the innate temperament of every given child in the family is also very important in determining what kind of interactions they would have with parents and the path that they would take. Also, one other thing, the roles already taken by other siblings in the family also constitute important influences on each additional child. We can talk a little bit more about that if we have time later. I think that this additional view that we have recently begun to have in exploring the relationships between parents and children, the additional view is one that puts a lot more emphasis on differential psychological needs and differential psychological susceptibilities of individual children and how that interacts with the same parents. So, for example, some of the characteristics of parenting styles of Holocaust survivors clearly indicate that because they were so aware of how dangerous life is, because they lost so much and suffered so much, they tended to be very overprotective, or what we call now overparenting, helicopter parenting, and so forth. They also tended to induce in their children, what I mentioned before, a very acute awareness to the parent's suffering and an acute awareness of the need to put one's own wishes or developmental curiosities aside if they meant causing the parents distress. So essentially, children felt compelled to give up their own needs in order to fulfill parental emotional needs. All of these things, we are just now beginning to have research that looks at the impact of overparenting, as it's called now, and the studies already definitely show that there are associations between overparenting and increased difficulties and distress in young adults. So in principle, if we look at it from the perspective of theories of family differentiation, family system, overparenting can harm young adults in the sense that it puts an overemphasis on relatedness needs at the expense of autonomy needs. And both relatedness and autonomy are really the two developmental pillars or forces in development. And my mentor at Yale, Professor Sid Blatt, wrote a lot about these two developmental forces and the interactions between them and how important it is that they would be in relative balance. However, in Holocaust families, the balance might have been tipped in the direction of overparenting, and children, though, have different needs. Some children, by temperament or by gender or by a lot of other things, may need more autonomy, while other children may need more relatedness. These children will respond differently and will perceive differently such parental behaviors. For some, it will feel like something intrusive and controlling. For others, it will feel like something caring and nurturing. However, what I see, as I said, is that when it's the son who experiences the parents as over-parenting, it can have more detrimental consequences for their own behavior, for their own development in the relationship with the parents and in general. So let me stop here for just 1 second. Okay. So the pattern that I've come to identify shows that throughout life, the children who I refer to as the more independent or the more emancipated, those who moved away, seem to have striven from a very early age to hide their developmental challenges from parents, to cope with their problems on their own, both in order to protect the parents from worry, so that was their way of protecting the parents from distress, and also in order to protect themselves from having to deal with the parental anxiety and worry and attempts to restrict their actions. So these children of survivors learn to keep it all to themselves, rely on their own resources, and while hiding many aspects of their lives from the parents, they actually were able to venture out and do all kinds of things without having to deal with the intrusive impact of their parents' anxieties. However, these are also children who did not get the benefit of what we call adult scaffolding or parental scaffolding. In many ways, they dealt with everything on their own and raised themselves on their own in their various encounters with the outside world. So while these children developed many real and significant strengths and skills through this process, their self-sufficiency and their tendency to hide their problems sometimes has become a characteristic of who they are in their adult relationships. So often these people find themselves also hiding their needs and their vulnerabilities from friends and even from spouses. They are often kind of unable to truly let anyone in. They're very proudly self-sufficient, but they sometimes express feeling this kind of an inexplicable sense of sadness or anger. They either feel or they actually organize their lives and their relationships in such a way that they always shoulder a heavy feeling, they feel that they always shoulder a heavy burden all alone. Kohut referred to this feeling. Kohut and Wolf, writing about Kohut, spoke about this as the feeling of the overburdened self. The overburdened self of a child who had to sort of develop real skills, but too fast and too early, and didn't have the scaffolding, as I called it before, when they needed it. And that child is often left with that kind of a sense of always being chronically burdened, chronically shouldering something alone, not able to ever have real help from anybody. In their relationship with parents and and with the more dependent siblings, the self-sufficient children resent deeply the never-ending caretaking that takes place continuously between their parents and their needy sibling. They look down at this needy sibling who elicits this caretaking and whom they feel drain the parents in many ways, physically, emotionally, sometimes financially. I always remember in this context the example of one patient who said to me, when I want to come and take my parents door to door in my car to my beautiful house in the suburbs to have a nice Shabbat with my family, they ach and krach and they tell me that they're too tired and they don't feel well and it doesn't happen. But when my sister, who has forever issues and problems and a difficult, volatile marriage, when she calls them, they schlep with pots of cooked food all the way to Long Island on public transportation to come and help her. So the self-sufficient child feels resentment for it, resentment for the draining of the parents, resentment for the disproportionate help that this child elicits. But what they sometimes fail to see is that the survivor parents who lost so many loved ones are often unable to handle the normative losses and the changing roles in the family as children grow up. And for them, these losses are very painful, or as one of the people who did a study in Australia, actually, and another one in Brazil, both of them speak about Cadrio in 1914 in Australia, and actually spoke about it in as strong terms as experiencing the growing up and the moving away of children is experienced by survivor parents as a death of the family as it was. So when parents need to feel needed, some children respond to such unspoken relational expectations by actually remaining enmeshed. They stay near the parents, they adopt the role of the caretaking and care-eliciting child, responding in some measure to the parents' emotional needs to remain needed, to remain intensely connected, and to not suffer new losses. These more dependent children, on the other hand, have their own perspective and their own reasons to criticize their siblings. They often feel that their sacrifices by staying nearby, by not going to the college far away. My patient that I mentioned before spoke about the fact that there was a family crisis. Both he and his brother left college for a particular period of time to come and help. But while he went back to college and got his PhD and has his profession, his brother never went back to college, remained in the family business, and has done more along this pattern that I'm describing to you. So the more dependent children often feel that their sacrifices freed their siblings from the commitments towards the parents and allowed them to pursue their own life. They who live nearby the parents are also often privy to the parents' hurt feelings about the self-sufficient child. When parents say, all kinds of things about, they never come, they don't come for long enough, they don't stay long enough, they don't talk about themselves, they don't share. Parents are very hurt by it often, and perceive it as if the self-sufficient child has kind of disconnected from them emotionally, which is very painful for them, and which they share with the more dependent child who's right there to hear it. So all of these things can actually fuel the perception by each sibling that the other one is hurting the parent or the parents, and since both of them are seen in studies, all children of survivors as a group are seen to be very focused on protecting their parents, each of them sees the other one as hurting the parents and is very resentful about it. Now, sibling differentiation and de-identification is a common phenomenon in family life. It's not just in Holocaust families. However, the reason for it is that each sibling sort of attempts to establish their own path, their own niche, as different from those of the other siblings, and it's their sort of claim to fame, their way of being unique and positive and worthy of parental love. The explanations that we have for it in terms of conceptual models, going back to Adler, are that this is an evolutionary wise thing to do because it is aimed at reducing friction between siblings so that they will not compete in exactly the same arenas. However, what I see is that in Holocaust families, these differences actually fuel more intense resentments, and I feel that extreme parental trauma, it interacts with many facets of life in the family, and it also interacts with sibling differentiation in the way that siblings become more different from one another and in the feeling that they have about each other and about those differences. So I feel that it is very, very important for us to understand the influences that extreme trauma, such as suffered by the Holocaust survivor parents, has on the relationships between siblings, so that we can try to understand for other populations, we can try to understand the factors that can protect protect sibling relationships in families, but in our population, where we are already adults, the best that we can do is try to understand the factors that can help us repair some of the damage to these relationships. A better understanding of these family dynamics has often been helpful in people that I have worked with. It's been helpful in making adult siblings see each other's path with a little bit more compassion and sort of gaining insight to the fact that survivor parents might have communicated very different needs to different children. For example, go out into the world and accomplish and do all the things that I couldn't do because I was prevented from doing it because of the Holocaust might have been a message more loudly and clearly communicated to boys, whereas stay by me and take care of me might have been a message more typically communicated to girls. I'm just giving it as an example. So becoming aware that parents may have communicated ambivalent messages, different messages that were perceived differently by different children, can help siblings accept with greater appreciation each other's attempts to protect the parents from some aspect of pain and suffering, even if they did it in a very different way from each other. So in recognizing the price that each sibling paid in choosing their own path, there is a chance for some new insight and greater mutual tolerance. The repair of the sibling relationships and the prevention of cutoffs in the relationship is particularly important with respect to the third generation, because this is a very large country. And when siblings don't want to maintain the relationship or do not make particular efforts to maintain them, the members of the third generation can quickly become complete strangers. And this phenomenon is de facto a destruction of the extended family, and what I think can easily be seen as another ripple of the genocidal trauma that the survivor parents lived through and that decimated their families. I think that, clearly there are often intensified resentments between siblings around the care of aging and ailing parents. There are sometimes very different opinions about how to protect the parents. Sometimes parents are in great pain and we can't necessarily make it a lot better. Sometimes parents are dying and this sibling thinks that they should be allowed to die more peacefully. This one thinks that every effort should be made to keep them alive as long as possible. There are a lot of issues around the care of aging and ailing parents that kick up a lot of the pain in families that are already very sensitized to loss, to pain, to how to protect parents, all of those things. These are the times in which these issues can become catastrophic in terms of the relationship in the family, and these are the time when we might be able to step in, and even if we can't explain everything that I talked about to the siblings around the bed of their parent who's suffering from some illness and they really can't listen to a whole lecture like that, but even being ourselves informed about this dynamics and about its possible implications for the relationship between the siblings and for why they are responding to each other with such vitriolic responses or feelings, even us being aware of it can inform us and allow us to respond to each of them in more validating, acknowledging ways that value their good intentions, and somehow sneak in there perhaps a softer view of the other person, the other sibling's path and perspective as well. Most important, I think we have to be able to find a way to indicate to the second generation when they have these terrible issues that might threaten the continuation of relationship, that the loss of the extended family and the loss of generational linkage was shown by studies to be one of the more painful aspects of family life in Holocaust families. And therefore, we really have to do whatever we can as parents, as professionals, to promote these relationships for the future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irit. If anybody has any questions, now is a good time, or unless Elisa and Anat want to speak up.
Anat?
Irit?
Yeah?
And maybe it's Anat. It's Irit and maybe
Hi.
Elisa. Hi. First of all, thank you. I'm sitting here mesmerized and listening to the presentation.
Thank you.
One of you or both of you talk a little about the work you've done in the group over the past year or so?
Yes. Well, Elisa, do you want to say something? I'll let you say something first, perhaps.
It's funny, I think that Anat and I were both just listening very intently to what you were saying, and then you stopped, and we both had this reaction of, what, it's over? How could it be over? Like recalibrating into another mode. We can, but I want us to talk a little bit more about the sibling piece. I think that because the group is for children of survivors, we have the children in the group who are very, very active.
Elisa, we're not hearing you very well. Can you speak up a little bit?
Oh. Okay. Hold on for 1 second. I said because the group is so large, there are times where we've had about 65 people in the group, and then there are times where it's smaller. We have a real mix of types of people who come. Some of the children who come, live with their parent, or their parent lives with them, and they're very involved in every aspect of their lives. And then some of the people who come are not as involved with their parent and would like to be, or would like to understand why their childhood was the way that it was, and why their relationships with their siblings aren't quite how they want them to be, or at all like they want them to be. And it's been a very gratifying experience to all sit in the room together, and for people to not just learn from Dr. Felsen, but also to hear from each other and to relate to things that other people in the group are saying. So, Dr. Felsen, did you wanna jump on that?
Well, not really. I think that the group, the only thing I would like to add is that the group has evolved into, I think, an incredibly meaningful experience. I mean, this is what I get in emails and in communications that, private communications from the group members. I think that just recognizing that some of these things that we might carry as our personal pain, just recognizing that some of it is not because my parent was uncaring or flew off the handle because they were, aggressive, or somebody said to me yesterday, my parent it's just an abusive personality. Well, there are people with an abusive personality, but really that parent seems to have been very kind and very loving in many ways, with very scary and abusive episodes, which we know can happen with post-traumatic stress disorder. So, and the same about sibling relationships. There is so little literature about sibling relationships in general. There is even less literature about sibling relationships in adulthood. So when people have terrible relationships with their sibling, there is little resources to go to and little awareness that this might be something that is not just your family, that there are some reasons for it, that it might be related to trauma, and that we may, when we see it in that context, we may have a little bit more ability to change the way we handle it. I'm not saying that at this point in life people can become loving siblings necessarily, but maybe they can handle it differently, as I said, especially with regards to leaving options open for the third generation.
Right. You said that very beautifully, because, the biggest success of the Nazis would be to have the grandchildren of the survivors not knowing each other and not talking to each other, not having a relationship with each other.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I think really hit people was understanding their role in their family growing up, and understanding their siblings, and by understanding how their brother might have needed to go to the Army, even if they're still upset about the fact that they felt like it almost killed Mommy and Daddy. But, understanding why that was good for him, and having the perspective now as somebody who has their own grown children. I think that sometimes what I've seen in the group is that people step away and say, "Oh, I didn't think about it that way," and maybe that's something that I can bring back into the relationship, and if I can understand him a little bit more, then maybe he'll understand how I needed to be a little bit more, and then maybe we can be a little bit closer, because it does feel so painful to not have this relationship.
And actually,
yeah.
No, go ahead, Elisa. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And actually, you just made me think of a very important point, which I forgot to mention, which is that this polarized differentiation, I'm the good girl, you're the bad boy, or I'm the one who always who cares about people and doesn't this and that, and you're the person who's out there in the world doing and achieving and whatnot. So I'm the one who always cares about what other people think, and I cannot be assertive, and I'm always about making peace, and you're the one who's out there achieving and doing and asserting yourself. All of those things also are related to much more polarized perceptions of ourselves. It's not just how I behave and how my brother or sister behave in the world. It's also about how I view myself. So if I have to be the opposite of you in order to be, the kind of daughter that I want to be to my parents, well, then also inside myself, my self-representation has become a little bit too monolithic and a little bit too rigid. And maybe if I can understand your past better now, then I can re-own or reclaim a little bit of that which was you and which I thought was so bad that I didn't want anything to do with it. So maybe now I can claim back and re-own a little bit more assertiveness, a little bit more of the ability to do that which you do, because I no longer see it as so totally and absolutely evil.
Right.
And I don't have to be so totally and absolutely the opposite of you. And maybe you, who has always had to defend themselves and be self-sufficient and do and be very assertive, maybe you can become a little bit more like me. And all of a sudden, and I see it in many families, I see let's say the prototypical thing would be the daughter who was very close to the parents and very feeling and very, very connected with their more depressive and more needy aspects, and the son who went out and achieved and accomplished and was not at all connected with these aspects and not at all connected with Holocaust issues and all of that. All of a sudden, in midlife, I see the daughter, if she's done some work on herself, becoming more assertive, more comfortable with her, shall I say, assertive aspects, and finding herself and delineating herself and her own boundaries better, and the son becoming a little bit more open to, a little softer, a little more open to emotional things, developing all of a sudden a willingness or an interest in hearing about the Holocaust and about what second generation is and so forth. So it's also about an enriching and a softening of rigid self-representations that allow us in midlife to become fuller versions of ourselves.
Right. And in the last couple of meetings, we've been exploring more about the other important relationships in our lives and how those also are healing and bring a healing back into the family of origin, and also a healing into ourselves that keeps some of the intergenerational effects of the trauma from moving forward. So that's been very, very interesting for any of you who are interested in looking up the blog. It's Irit Felsen, right?
Yes, iritfelsen.wordpress.com.
Mm-hmm. And
I also, go ahead, Elisa.
Yeah, I was going to say that you really write up all of the discussion very, very well, and particularly the last two have probably been my favorites, although I have many, many favorites, and we have a lot of people who are following the blog articles from other places out of New York because, unfortunately this wasn't a series that we were able to have teleconferenced in a way that it was available outside of people who could come to Brooklyn. So it's been a way to share the material and discussion with people who live much further, but I feel that not just for children of survivors, that as professionals we can read that and grow in our understanding of how to help the children be the people that we need them to be in caring for their parents right now and understanding where they're coming from and where they're coming from.
And also for themselves. I mean,
helping
in the end,
right.
In the end, here and there, we actually do even see a rapprochement between siblings. And, right now we're in midlife, but we will grow older. And if we can do something to improve things, it's good. Now, I just wanted to mention, by the way, for those of you who might be interested in a more in-depth discussion of it than I can even put on the blog, I just finished writing a paper about it, which I'm submitting these days, and another one which I'll submit soon because I'm not completely done with it, both specifically about this issue that we talked about today. And when they appear in publication, I will put a notice about it on my blog. So those of you who are interested can check and see where it is and let me know if you're interested. I can share it with you. Once it's published, I can share the paper with people who are interested.
Or I could post it on the Facebook group so it will be available to all of us. I do think that the blog articles are posted on the Facebook group through, I think Autonomy does that every month. So
yes,
that should be up there. So that's helpful. But I want to open this discussion up to, a little bit further than talking about our group because this is so relevant to all of our colleagues. I mean, we all have we all have clients who have children who are estranged and other ones who are maybe too close and not taking care of themselves, and we're worried about both of them, along with many other variations of, a family configuration. So if you'd like to unmute yourself to be able to ask a question or make a comment, Javi, do you want to talk about that, or do you want to just unmute everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead and ask. Does anybody have a question?
This is Gail in Cincinnati, and I've got
Hi,
two
Gail.
questions. Hi, Reed. My first question is: have you extended it to those who are from the former Soviet Union? My parents are camp survivors from Poland and Czechoslovakia, and it's very interesting for me to see how my peers are struggling with their parents, those who came from, under communism and from the former Soviet Union. And then I have a second question. When one has a sibling who has this history of secrecy, and privacy, do you have any specific strategies of dealing with that behavior?
Well, it really depends on to which extent that behavior somehow is really relevant to the other sibling's life. I mean, right? What do you mean? There are many levels to that behavior. Some of them can be simply as I described it. People who really they really disclose very little about themselves, but it's not in a when you say secrecy, there's a slightly different flavor to it. So what I'm trying to say is, if what hurts you is simply the aspect of being shut out, then perhaps there is a way of saying something, not in a blaming way, but perhaps about how it makes you feel. If it's secrecy that's, in your opinion, somehow more damaging, that it's about things that you really ought to know about and are kept away from you, that's a different matter. There's a difference between privacy and secrecy, and there's different levels. Do you understand what I'm saying, Gail?
Yes. That's very interesting. I often find that for me, like proxies, or I get my best advice from my daughter, from the third generation. But it's so challenging not to put a third, our children in that role of helping us with our communication.
Yeah. It's very, that's the kind of a question. Sometimes there are certain questions that cannot be answered in a general way, that can really only be answered by looking at the exact situation we're talking about and understanding what's going on there. So I'm sorry if I'm not able to give a more general answer, but I think that in the general sense, I would say, as I said before, there's a difference between privacy and secrecy, and privacy can also be very offensive and very hurtful when you want to be more in the in circle somehow with somebody, and they're showing you repeatedly that you're not. It can be very hurtful. And then the question is if you think that you can express it to them in a non-blaming way, but rather as something that you would like them to know, that you feel this way, that you would like it to be different. And if there's a way that you can find to do it with them that might be constructive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
There was a question that was typed in for you, so I'm just going to read it. Okay. How relevant is favoritism in Holocaust families, and if it is, why is that?
Great question.
Well, right. Well, that's exactly in some ways what we're talking about, right? The sense of favoritism or the actual appearance of favoritism. That's what we're talking about. It's frequent. I think that's because of what I said, because there are difficulties in open communication in the family, and there are polarizing messages, and children take it and run with it, and it can lead to all kinds of situations like this where, for example, the one who stayed nearby, I kind of said it delicately before when I said that the one who stayed nearby and who takes care of the parents but is also taken care of by the parents, this child is often the favorite child. In some ways, they get a lot more attention. They get a lot more of the parents' actual emotional and fiscal resources, all of that stuff. And that can be sometimes very real. The patient who said that he doesn't see his brother even though they live in the same town also told me that this brother, the family business is now the brother's business. The mother has retired, and when the mom comes to visit from far away, he says she often doesn't tell me. She goes to my brother's, she visits with him in the same town, and she only tells me that she was there in retrospect. How hurtful is that? How hurtful is that, right? So that can be one form of favoritism. The other form of favoritism is sometimes the opposite, namely the one who lives nearby is the one who takes care of all the daily things, takes the parents to the doctor and does this and fixes the light bulb that burned and this and that and all of that. But the one who went further away and who's successful and does well and everything is the one who gets the phone calls from the parents who complain all the time about all the worries and the concerns and the issues that the one who lives nearby causes them or shares with them. And so the one who's far away is actually the favorite and seen as the white hope of the family, the one who succeeded and did well, the one who never puts anything on the parents, the one who, when they come to visit, it's a big holiday, it's a whole hug, whereas the one who's nearby is the one who's there all the time. So there are various constellations in which there is a favorite, but favoritism in and of itself is very frequent because favoritism is another manifestation, very clear manifestation of lack of good integration and lack of good communication. So lack of good integration in the way that various messages were handled by the parents, by the children, in family communication, in the relationships that evolved. Somehow things became very polarized and very unequal.
I have a question. I've heard it said that children of survivors in some ways are like yahrzeit candles for some parents because they name the children after people that they have. What kind of an impact does that have on sibling relationships?
So the term memorial candles was coined by Dina Vardi from Israel, an older colleague, very lovely, not a child of survivors herself, but someone who worked with groups of children of survivors in the late 80s. And she termed this coin, and her perception was that in every family, and she wasn't alone, there was also a few other people who spoke about similar concepts before that, around that time. Their concept was that there is one child in the family that becomes kind of the carrier of the family Holocaust issues and legacy and frees the other children in the family from this burden. And I think that I have a somewhat different view. So while it is true that sometimes there is one person in the family that shows more damage, more impact of the legacy of the Holocaust in more visible ways, namely they feel it more subjectively, they've succeeded less in the world. Like I said before, if it's the son who stayed close by, then there's a group of these sons who show a lot of damage. They didn't succeed well financially and professionally, even though they were very, very bright and talented. Their relationship histories are bad, divorces, children who don't speak to them, all kinds of things like that. But there are all kinds of more damaged groups and individuals. You know, a study in Israel that looked at a very large sample found that about 13% show indication for having more severe second-generation syndrome, so to speak. So I think that, yes, there is a group that's more severely or more visibly impacted, but I see it more in terms of the impact was different. So the child who was more emancipated, let's say, and was able to go farther away and has a life that looks much more successful professionally, financially, even in terms of their relationship and all of that. But that's the child who also did away without that parental scaffolding, without the help, without the sense of parental comfort and all of that, which the other care eliciting child in their way may have elicited much more. So the loneliness, if you like, the lack of availability of parental support is part of what the other one had to pay, in a sense, for their choice and for their interpretation of what they needed to do to bring their parents nachas. So I don't think that there's exactly a memorial candle for each family. I think that there is a different impact in different ways on all children of survivors. Yet there are some children who are definitely impacted more severely because of all these factors that go into it that I said. The time, the gender, if you reminded me of, if one child looks exactly the way my younger sister did that I was very close to and who got killed, all kinds of things can play into making the impact more severe for one particular child than for others. But I really think that the impact is in the family on all children.
Can you also finish up by telling us a little bit about a situation you might have encountered where there were siblings that were in very different places, and through talking to them or helping them understand each other, they were able to end up in a better place?
I'm sorry, Elisa, I couldn't hear very well. Can you say that again?
I said I'm wondering if we could finish up by your telling us maybe about a family that you worked with where the siblings were in completely different places emotionally, and through understanding each other a little bit better, things continued on a better path for the family.
Well,
and for them.
I cannot tell you about Walt Disney type endings, but I can tell you, for example, with my patient Monica, after years of having no connection with the brother, she actually did establish connection. They actually exchanged some nice emails. She actually, at some point, went to visit him and his family far away in a different state. She got to spend some time with his young family. He had established a family relatively late and has a young family. So she had a chance to meet them and to spend some time with them and to create a relationship with them. Since then, she's been, mailing birthday gifts and cards and things like that. He was able, as a result of all of that, also to reestablish connection with his parents that he cut off for quite a while. And that was good because he managed to do it just before their father got sick and died. So all of that was good, but not without creases, because, there have been also some not so good interactions in between, and now that the father passed away, there is again some stuff around the care of the elderly mother, and around I think also some unspoken concerns about finances and how they would be divided, since this one is here and has cared for the parents all this time and he's away. So it's not without creases, but I think one can still say that these things were positive developments.
And are you saying that through working with Monica, she was able to take that information and be less polarized in her approach to her brother, and her brother was able to react to that? Or do you think she shared information that you had talked about? I
don't think that she was able to share much information, although she did try, and I think she did do some of that, and she did try to encourage him to go and find a group of second generation where he is and so forth, and told him, I think that might have had some influence perhaps, but mainly it changed her view and her willingness to increase her level of tolerance for certain things, and certainly changed her feeling about what a terrible thing he did and what a terrible person he was. And it really wasn't a new thing, because already in the beginning when she was talking about him, while she was still blaming him greatly and saying what a horrible thing he did, she was able to tell me about all these very difficult things that they were treated very differently in the family. She was never the target of physical violence. He was. She had a room. He did not. He lived in the unfinished basement. All kinds of things,
Yeah.
And she was able to put it together all of a sudden and integrate it in a different way that allowed her to behave differently, and that had, I think, an impact. I'm sorry that I'm not managing to come up with one of the perhaps
this is beautiful
more...
because we felt like we already got to know Monica a little bit, so this was actually the best.
Exactly. So that's why I thought,
because it's not dramatic, right?
No, it's not dramatic, and it doesn't end with wonderful music and an all happy ending, because life is not always quite like that. But it's still better, and it still opens up some possibility for the third generation to know that they have, uncle and aunt, that they have cousins, that maybe I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about a very different family where there was a total cutoff between the brother and the sister. But because of actually me working with each of them separately, I think things really changed much, much more positively even. They don't love each other now, and they don't do a lot with each other now, but they have a relationship again, and the children are, I think, in a much more, the grown-up third generation are feeling a much more positive atmosphere with regards to communicating with the two sides of the family.
Right, which is so beautiful.
Yeah, which is so important.
Especially when it's not there, right? So thank you. This was very helpful. I sometimes the work that we see, we can see and we can experience, but we can't put into words the beauty. And I feel that way about this group and how it comes together, and people come in each time and talk about what kind of an impact it's had on them and their relationships. And I wanted to share a little bit of that with our teleconference group. And I hope that you'll look up Dr. Felsen's blogs. And I want to thank everybody for joining today, particularly Dr. Felsen, for sharing and for giving of your time for this. And this is just wonderful and will hopefully create more healing even outside of Brooklyn.
Lisa, thank you very much. Really, thank you for the opportunity to share. It means a great deal to me. And anybody who has any other questions, you're very welcome to communicate with me on through the blog or through email. And thank you for listening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Take care.